Hi everyone, it's great to meet you all. Even though I can't see you, I mean you can see me. Welcome to this workshop, Hacks for People, Not Users. And so I know there are many ways that you can think about a hackathon project idea. And so you could look on the internet, you could have a light bulb moment in the weeks leading up to the event, or I don't know, there are many different ways essentially. It's a big decision. And so really hoping that this workshop, we can walk through how to find a project idea that hits two things that you may not have considered or really intentionally brought into that design process before you actually start building. And so those two things are making sure that it is people-centric and making sure that it incorporates you, your goals, and your interests. And so this is more of a workshop related to user experience rather than user interface design, but all captured under the umbrella of design. And so like we mentioned in the chat, feel free to ask questions in Slido at any time. And we have a couple people who will be helping us moderate that. And so shout outs to Rachel and Kim in the background. Awesome. So I might as well just get started. So hi, I'm Serena. It's great to meet you all again. I'm a strategist at Gemic, and we are a global strategy consulting firm. I graduated from electrical engineering back in 2019 from UBC, but I'm originally from the GTA. And so, having the best of both worlds, both food worlds here in Canada. So at Gemic, which I am a strategist. So what does that even mean? So that means that we help companies think about the future. And so that's kind of why why I'm actually doing this workshop in the first place. We've been doing a lot of work with food and beverage and consumer packaged goods. So you can think about shampoos and things like that. And social tech. And social tech has been my kind of world that I've been steeped into over the past year. So on a weekday basis, I'm thinking about culture, business, tech, everyday culture, and what's shifting within those. And so within our tech clients might be interesting. It's like, who do we actually talk to? Who are we actually working with to come up with a human-centric, people-centric strategy? And so we work with product development teams, research teams, product teams, user experience teams, you name it. The nature of the client actually dictates more, and the team that they're on dictates more about what recommendations we offer rather than the research that we do itself. And so that's kind of the background that I'm bringing to how we can actually think about projects that are exciting and also, of course, work for you. So a rough overview of this workshop, we'll go through a couple things. First is, what does people-centric actually mean? And so this is more so like a primer towards thinking about user experience. Then we'll go into the actual ideation process. And so that comes in three parts, which is identifying your goals and interests, going from those interests to ideas, and then connecting all those dots together. And so this is a rough estimation as to how the time will, be distributed over the hour, but we might end a little bit early, and then, I can always just hop onto Discord and, we can just chat there rather than, giving more time to walk through the steps. And of course, I'll share the slides after. So in this workshop, you can approach this two ways. You can either follow along as we go through, maybe have one example or two as we go through each step, or you can listen and just go through them at your own pace later. And so that's recommended for people who don't have their full teams attending, or making the most of the week to actually form their team before the weekend. Awesome. So what does people-centric actually mean, and why does it matter? We have to ground the whole question before we actually start thinking about the tactical part. How are we doing this? And so think about your favorite app. Take a few moments. You could even scroll through your phone if you want to get a little bit of inspiration, and think about why it's a fulfilling experience. And so would love to have some of your answers. If you go to slido.com and enter the code 642855, there should be a code at the top. Or if you've been to a workshop before, you already know where that is. And so I'll give, a couple minutes. I'll wait for a couple of responses. As we wait for responses to go into Slido, maybe I can tell you about my favorite app that I've discovered. Actually like maybe I'll talk about an app that I discovered. It was like earlier this year, and I don't quite use it anymore, but it's called Luna. It was a like sleepscape app where basically it's like coloring and filling in like color by numbers, but color by cues, and almost like a hide and seek kind of experience that would help you go to basically fall asleep easier. And what I really enjoyed about that was it was backed in, it had like research backed to show that it was, helping you fall asleep. Another thing that I really appreciated was its gentleness of the experience that actually showed as well. What was it? Basically, like the gentleness showed that they really cared about having the same aura and atmosphere maintained through the entire experience. Yeah. So I see a couple of of answers here. But you have Pokemon Go, Pinterest. Great to know the apps, but also I would love to know like what about those apps? Like of course there's so many different features. Like what are you getting from it? Mm-hmm. I also see YouTube, Notion. Oh, we've got Reddit. Mm-hmm. Intuitive. Mm-hmm. Totally. Maybe I'll wait for one more. Get to 10 responses here. Okay, well, I see a lot about the feeling that you get when you are doing the experience. So we have like entertaining, intuitive, everything in one place, the quickness of an app, and lively. So a lot of these are more so like the smoothness of the experience, the seamlessness of the experience. And so those are great ways to think about it. And other ways could also be like the outcomes that come out of it. So rather than the experience itself, it's also like, was it fulfilling afterwards as well in every part of that user journey? So at the end, after leaving the app, maybe even like thinking back about the app afterwards, did it make you smile? Did it help you solve a problem? Did it help you streamline a process? I see like Notion here about how everything is in one place. Did it create a hub for you? It organized things for you. And of course, we did have the easiness aspect. Yeah. Oh, I see an interesting one here about Reddit, specifically about Reddit. It's like you had niche communities, and I think that's a really great example of like how detailed we kind of want to go. It's like, what about Reddit? It's like, of course, it brings communities together, but their ability to like organize different interests and actually give communities a space for them to explore those interests and actually customize their space. That's one way that it actually, I guess, creates a little bit more of a sense of immersion in that app compared to, I guess, when you go on to Facebook group communities, for example. Awesome. And so we've got a one big tip here, which is let people be your guide. We've all been users ourselves, and we know when something is working or something isn't working for us. And so one thing to keep in mind when you're thinking about your project is the final product is more so about the human experience rather than the software itself. And so what that means is maybe it's focusing more on the outcomes, the feelings that come out of a project rather than, or even like the helpfulness and what resonates with the person rather than how neat is your code, how optimized is it? Like, of course, in certain cases, which I guess some people have mentioned, like we want it to be fast and like, yes, but it's like, is it fast to make it a better human experience, or is it just fast to like be the best? And at that point, I guess it's up to you as to like how you want to budget your time and budget your resources to solving some of those problems. All right, so moving on to like the user experience design process. And so we've got six steps here on the left, and this is just how InVision has described their process. But the internet has, tons of different variations on this. And so this name varies across companies, but the steps remain relatively the same. And I'd say that like tech companies basically like go through this process, or basically, anybody can go through a process to design a product in this way. And so we'll talk through them in terms of like a hackathon. And so what we're kind of actually doing over the next hour is understanding. It's understanding who our users are, who our people are, what they actually want to do, and then going into validation. And so research and analyze is a point where you're able to take these steps to validate your problem. You can go online to research, invalidate or validate some of your hypotheses. You can look at papers. Another great way is that you can use the research to serve as a starting point for inspiration if you don't actually have a starting point. And so then you also have the design aspect. And so this is the meat and potatoes of building out your idea. This is like the bulk of the weekend, creating features and then iterating from there. Then you have launch. And so at a hackathon, this part is your pitch. This is when you are writing out your project on DevPost, things like that. And then you have analyze again. And so this is when you like receive some feedback. If you do want to continue the process and iterate on this, that's the point where you can go back to really any of these steps where you think that it's necessary to. And so a couple of tips as we go is knowing that this is iterative, right? Like we don't have any arrows here, but you can kind of imagine them. And what's great is that you can start anywhere. And so maybe you are on the internet and like the reason why you're able to come up with an idea that inspires you is because you were reading an article that is related to one of your interests anyway. And so that already gives you a head start into figuring out, what might you want to actually build. And of course, keeping in mind that everything is for the user experience. And I guess also another point that I want to bring up is the fact that product development is interdisciplinary. And so we have a lot of different roles that come together at a company to do product development. And so that might be including the user experience researchers, you have the designers themselves, you have like the UI designers, you also have the product managers, right? And so all these different people are bringing in their different perspectives and coming in, following this relative design process, but taking on certain aspects of this as more of their responsibility. And so, for example, you might have product managers that are very deep into the analyze and design section, really interfacing with the developers and making sure that it matches, any business requirements that are required. But then you might also have the user experience researchers who are more so in the top three sections. So like understand, to analyze, and working from there. Awesome. And so I want to leave you with this quote. And so this is from Anthropology Inc. It was an article back in 2013, but tech designers succumb to the illusion that their users are all engineers. And although this might feel like it's calling out the tech designers, I promise that this is also a thing in any industry you go to. Engineering designers, construction designers, anybody, like we are always so much in our bubble, and it's always good to acknowledge that there's more out there. We just have to be curious about it. Awesome. And so to wrap it all up, people-centric design is an iterative approach to finding and solving these people problems. And so how are we actually going to find those people problems? Let's go into the actual workshop, the project ideation section, and see how we can actually get to that step and what would be the easiest way to transition there. Awesome. So this is your project. We're going to start with goals and interests. And remember, the focus here is it's yours, right? If you're working on a team, I recommend thinking for yourself first, then discussing as to, how can we actually meld them all together. And so really interested, I'm going to also open another poll here. What skills are you hoping to learn this weekend? And I think I'm looking for more technical skills. And so is there anything that you're particularly curious about? Or is there a skill that you'd like to continue developing? Or maybe it's even something that will prepare you for a future class or applying for jobs. And so if you're in a team, you can share with each other once you know or once you've thought about one or two. And then also what's great is even if you are on a team, the similarities and the variety, both of them are pros. And the best part is just the fact that you are sharing with like what you are hoping to get out of the weekend. And so your list can be as short or as long as you want, but maybe prioritizing one or two skills at the top of your mind. And so having this open up to everybody is to hopefully this to serve as a source of inspiration as you think through. Yeah. So I see a couple of votes for design. Is there something specifically about design? Is it like working with a specific tool like Figma or Sketch? Or is it trying to create, I guess, like go through like wireframes and translating wireframes into like a concrete design? Is it about like achieving the best user interface? Lots of votes for design, but not surprising since we are a design workshop. We've also got like cloud, APIs, machine learning. I think that's really great because, and that's on the level that we're looking for because as you actually, if you know that this weekend is something that you want to dedicate to machine learning, then you want to have when you think about a project, you want to be able to incorporate that as well. Cool. All right. So maybe I'll just go on to the next question. And I know there's many more skills that you might want to learn. They're all, just keep those in mind. I also recommend maybe like writing them down so maybe you don't forget them. And so next thing is like what interests you? And so this should be, I guess, like more removed from the whole technical side. Pick 1 to 3, maybe they're hobbies, maybe they're social issues, anything that feels broad enough for project ideas to kind of come out of it. Yeah. Think about something or a couple of things that will hold your curiosity and your attention over the entire weekend. And so depending on, I guess, your preference, that might be something that you have a lot of exposure to, or it might be something that you have some experience with, but not a lot. Or if it's something that you might care a lot about and you have a lot of experience with, that actually could be another great segue into thinking about a project idea. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so if you're working on a team, I think same thing here. If you have any similarities, and that's awesome because they'll make it easier to kind of like hone in on one interest that you want to focus on. Or if you have variety, then maybe there's ways to, I guess, even have a tool that spans across and is used more broadly. Mm-hmm. This is also a great reminder to check out the sponsor prizes. If you are interested in making a project specifically for a sponsor prize, you can skip, I guess, like this particular step of thinking about what interests you, unless you really like to, like, I guess, reflect on your own personal identity. But those sponsor prizes will come in handy in the next step as well. Awesome. Cool. And I see like environment, social impact games. Those are, definitely places where, lots of possibility can come out of there. Okay, so next we've got turning these interests into ideas themselves. And so think about maybe your list of interests, however long it might be. And maybe take this time, like, I don't know, pick out one or two. You can circle them, you can underline them as a focus just for this exercise. And because we know that this is an iterative process, like no need to panic too much about picking the right one. You can always come back and change it later. And so the first thing we want to do is like thinking about who we want to build for. And so a common tool that user experience designers use is the idea of user personas or personas in general. And so one thing that I'd love for you to think about is a common persona within one of your interests. And so personas will help us understand people's needs, experiences, behaviors, and goals. And so you have an example on the right, which is in my opinion, but also I guess you can agree with me, not very good. And so, just reading through it, it says like, as a user, which, first thing, already a no, because we want to have it very people focused. I want content. It's like, we're missing a lot of detail here so that I engage. It's like, first of all, I don't know anything about that. I think when you were talking about like why something is a fulfilling experience, we know that there are better ways to describe that than I'm engaging. It's like, how are you engaging? Is it because, are you like doing it because it's a tool? Is it actually solving a problem? So I guess for an example, to make this a little bit better, I changed this into, okay, maybe I'll use food as an example because I'm a big foodie. So as a person who is, I guess, a young adult who wants to cook, but also doesn't have very good skills, giving them a little bit more of like a personality. I want, a grocery list to be based off of my meal planning. You can't have a meal without the ingredients. And so you might as well be prepared. And so maybe that's like, something that I find that I really want. And it's like, it's like, what's the actual outcome of this? Like, why would I actually use this tool? And you can actually list out a couple of things. It doesn't have to be limited to one thing. It can be, it's to save time. It can actually, streamline my grocery shopping. Maybe it's actually a way for me to like think before and actually like kind of decrease the amount of spontaneity I have to do in the kitchen. So things like that. And what's great is like, that's already thinking more about, building out who is this person and what do they want? So one tip is if you, I think sometimes it's hard to think about people outside of yourself, like how can you really, you can argue that it's very difficult to even step into somebody else's shoes if it can't be as authentic, but you can also generalize your own experiences to come up with a persona, especially within an interest. And so maybe it's, for example, I think the environmental idea is if you have an idea for, environmental activists. And if you aren't personally an activist, maybe that's very hard for you to think about themselves. But what you could do is like, maybe just think about somebody who has less engagement, but still wants to really be engaged. And so those are two different types of people that you would be designing for. Mm-hmm. And so knowing, I guess, who that end user and person is, that's very helpful. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so you'll hear me go back and forth between user and person. And although I try and like avoid user is just such embedded in like tech language. And I think it's great. It's fine as a word to use as long as we know, like that our language does affect the way that we design. And so keeping the person in mind, using some of these tactics, even if we're still using that language, there are trade-offs, but both of them will hopefully, when they work together, will help us get to the place that we want to be. Awesome. And so once you've figured out who this persona is, you've identified a couple of their needs, their behaviors, what they like to do. Maybe it's their interests. Then we go into their pain points. And so what are pain points, first of all? And so pain points in this left column, I've described them in 3 ways. And, these are just 3 different ways, but to start thinking about them, but by no means like exhaustive. They can be disruptive problems that people face, when something lags, when something doesn't work in the way that they expected. they can be unmet needs that people have. And unmet needs, I think, are they're like a key term that people use to describe these pain points. And so they are things that people have, like they want to do, but they can't do. And that's probably the hardest part to identify because you don't know what you don't know. And so that's probably an area where user research comes in, where you can actually kind of ask them, kind of observe their behavior and figure out, oh, actually, like you say that you want this, but like there's nothing about this app that is actually helping you. And that is, a great way to, for, I guess, like app developers to actually improve and actually prioritize what they want to improve on. Then we have sources of workarounds. And so when people are, going through elaborate setups, I guess like spending lots and lots of time because they're invested, there are ways to make that process easier. And that was something that we thought that we mentioned earlier about having a fulfilling experience where, you want it to be easy, you want it to be seamless. And so to be able to actually just make that easier for them, there is opportunity there. Mm-hmm. And also, one thing is also, it doesn't have to be a groundbreaking idea, whatever you come up with. And so maybe it's actually the fact that you are borrowing an idea from a different market, a different country, or a different group of people, and applying it to people who don't currently have access to the solution. And so, for example, you have like small business credit cards and a bank account and things in fintech that are currently bubbling a lot in the States, but we may not have the same type of solutions in Canada. And so maybe it's actually specifically thinking, oh, how can I actually build that same solution, but for Canadians instead? So that can also be one way to do it. Mm-hmm. And then from there, you can actually tailor that idea to the people who you are creating for. So that is the first part. The first part is figuring out, are there, 3 to 5, maybe not even that many, but maybe even like 1 to 3 really strong pain points for your persona that you can come up with. And so from there, how you can actually go through these pain points to actually identify, okay, what am I actually going to use is by going through them and seeing which ones inspire you, which one makes you think about the ways that it can be solved. And so the only one criteria that your solution needs to meet is that it needs to address the pain point. And so maybe there's actually a solution that covers all 3 of the pain points. Maybe not in an entire, like a 1 weekend hackathon, but if it was a longer idea that you wanted to build on, maybe that means that this weekend you focus on one of them, and then you can actually mention the other pain points and the other possible ways that you would solve those pain points as possible extension of your project. And so those are the 2 steps. And I know we're going a little bit fast, but we can always, I feel like when you have the time to simmer on this, it might be helpful because everybody's project ideation process will be a little bit different depending on, the scope of your pain points, et cetera. And so knowing that at this section, it is, once again, iterative. So if you have your persona and you feel really strongly about this persona, once you go into the pain points, it might be difficult to figure out, okay, which one is the one that I should prioritize? And so you can think about which one might occur earliest in the persona's journey, which one might be most significant to them, or which one might actually take the most time. And so different things that help you understand or actually help you make a decision, essentially. Another thing is that on the other hand, if your pain points are too vague to actually think about any solutions, you could also think about going back to the persona and giving it a little bit more specificity. And so maybe that is elaborating, like their tech background. Maybe it's elaborating where they live, things like that, more personal traits. Awesome. And so then another thing is if it's hard to figure out with, all of them seem a little bit too vague. You can also come up with a different persona with somebody that resembles somebody close to you. And so maybe you can actually say, oh, I actually want a design for my friend, like Michael, for example. And so at that point, you can think about, okay, well, what do they like to do? And like, if they are, and of course, like within that interest is helpful. And then you can go from there. So lots of different options. So finally, we want to connect the dots into an idea that's ready to go. And so what is the thing, what other things are we missing here? We have your goals, your interests, and you also have your you have your ideas that came out of the other process. And so a couple more things to keep in mind are these three final considerations. So number one is, what platform do you want your project to be on? And so the way that you go through, I guess, like the rest of the process of committing to an idea, I think depends on, like, do you want it to be a web app? Do you want it to be, a VR experience? First, I guess also this determines how big of a scope you kind of want to commit to over the weekend. And number two, it's like, what skills do you already have and what skills do your team already have? And so if actually, I guess, creating slide decks is your passion and it's your strong point, maybe then you can actually figure out what will be your easy wins, and it'll help you plan out the timeline of the hackathon as well. We all do like to get some sleep during hackathons. And so does this mean that maybe you can leave that to the morning? Is that something that you can deal with maybe later on? Or maybe actually, like, the skill that you already have is coming up with translating wireframes into an MVP. And so it's important to know where your strengths lie so that you can figure out, okay, what am I actually want to spend the most time on, which is probably the skills that you're hoping to learn, and how will that be balanced with all these other things that go into actually completing a full-fledged project. And so when we go into the third question, which is, what skills are you hoping to learn this weekend? Things, looking down your list, it's like, what are the key parts of your project? And so when you are planning through the different aspects, maybe this is the time that you sync with your team members to divide up the different work, the different pieces of work, and allocating where your responsibilities want to lie. And so I want to leave you with one final tip, and that is to keep on iterating and keep asking what will provide the most value to people. And so this part is like, I guess if you had to take away one thing, it's what will provide the most value to people. Ask yourself that throughout the design process. And hopefully you can come up with an idea that you really stick to and really proud of as you can, and then to set you up for the rest of the hackathon, essentially. Awesome. And so thank you. If you have any questions, feel free to send. I do see a couple here, and so I can actually just go through some of these questions now. So, okay. I have the one question, which is, what techniques do you use to validate your product and design? And so I know one thing, especially in in-person hackathons, it was, going around and showing this prototype to certain people, actually, and seeing what they think, maybe even, not going around randomly, but actually thinking about, like, who is the person that you're trying to design for, and getting some of their feedback, and asking them what you would like them to, what they would like you to actually build, and what it would make what would make them actually use it. Other techniques, I think, is that you can do, you can actually look at the competitors that are out there. And so maybe it requires going through a quick little scan of the most popular apps that are already in that section and figuring out, what do their comments actually say? What do people really enjoy? What gives them a 5-star review? But also, what makes them not want to use it other than, performance issues like that. Cool. Another question is about, how do you conduct your user research? And so I actually have, I do a lot of ethnography in my work. And so, that that's one part of qualitative research. And so another thing that you could do is quantitative research. I think there are like different ways that you can balance user research, but there was also another full-on workshop about user research. So I encourage you to go check that out, done by Joanne, and it was hosted yesterday. Awesome. And so how do you, okay, yeah, there's one more question I think about projects themselves. It's like, at my workplace, how did you decide who is your primary target audience? And so that one, that's a good question. We usually have scoped a project to figure out, we usually do know who our primary target audience is, but sometimes it is so broad where we don't even know. The whole project is actually identifying primary target audiences. And so I think that in the first case where, it's informed by business decisions, there's other research that has already informed that. But then on the other side, it's like how we get there. It is really going from a bottom-up approach, talking to a lot of people and seeing, what sticks with people, and actually coming up with a couple of traits yourself. And so instead of actually building for how do you design for them, it's figuring out who are those people. Awesome. Okay, and we got one more question here. It's, how do you create a product if you're new to programming and only know the basics, like different algorithms, concepts? How do you create a product? That's a good question. I would definitely start with what you're interested in, because hopefully that already like narrows it down into like, okay, what kind of project am I doing? And then from there, maybe it is thinking about, I would actually Google like maybe it's like simple web apps or tools that you can do. I imagine that you'd focus on like one pain point. Maybe it's actually like a puzzle, and focus it more on, getting a little bit of functionality done rather than on the design. And what you can do is you can also, there's tons of online tools to help you even generate design, or help you use templates. And so you can focus more on that front end rather than, or back end rather than your front end. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Awesome. So I do hope that I answered some of your questions. I know I blitzed through some of them. And so if you have any more questions about people centricity or anything workshop related, happy to be in Discord and answer them there. I also just saw one come in, but maybe I'll go into the next slide. And so I'm happy to answer any questions about, strategy consulting, even hear about your podcast recommendations on Discord when we wrap this all up. And so also feel free to go, it would be great if you could go to Slido. We have a workshop poll open now where you can give some of your feedback. And of course, we have a couple of links if you still want to connect with me after. And now I will go into this last question. All right. Is it worth following through with product ideas that will only cater to a niche audience? I think the answer is yes. And I think that we've actually seen that more and more, especially as if people have been following the NFT communities. It's like, I think one thing that you can think about is, in what ways is it niche, right? Like, because there are different ways that you can cut that. You can think about, the accessibility aspect, right? Like, are you really hoping to cater? Do you want to design for a type of product that is only accessible to a certain group of people? Are you actually hoping to target those people because, maybe they don't have those particular solutions at their disposal? And so I think there's definitely a world where, these product ideas should be pursued. But I guess it depends on, are you interested in it? Is it actually something that it makes sense to be followed through with this weekend? Or is that actually a larger scoped idea? Great. Awesome. So I'll kind of be here. I'll hover for the next couple of minutes in case any other questions come up. But otherwise, thank you again for coming to this workshop. I hope you enjoyed it and learned something. Have a great Hack of the North weekend. right, so it sounds like we're going to end the stream here, and so we can transition over to Discord. If you would like to, feel free to message me, and have a great week. See you later.